Aloha, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening. I'm Yunji. Thank you for joining us for this very important discussion tonight. We have some fantastic panelists to talk about the reversal of Roe versus Wade and how it impacts Hawaii. Of course, we want to mahalo the YWCA of Oahu for holding this virtual panel and kicking us off in this very important discussion that we know will be ongoing for some time. I think a lot of women were stunned at this decision and have a lot of questions, men and women, I should say, in our community, stunned at the decision and want to know how it impacts us right here at home. So thank you for those of you who are joining us on Facebook. Those, of course, who are joining us via Zoom, you can type questions that you have for our panelists in the comment section if you happen to be on Facebook, or in the Q&A section if you are joining us here via Zoom. And this will be available after the discussion on the YWCA of Oahu's website, along with the Facebook page. So there will be plenty of resources along with that. But let's get right into our discussion. I'm Yunji. I'll be your moderator tonight. I want to invite the panelists to go ahead and introduce themselves and let us know briefly about how they come to this discussion and what perspective they hope to bring tonight. Corianne, if we could start with you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Corey Lau, and I'm a partner at the law firm of Dentons, US LLP. We used to be known as Alston Hunt Floyd and Ng. My practice areas are primarily employment law and litigation, administrative law and compliance, government contracts, and commercial contracts and litigation. I've always been a supporter of women's rights, and I was active with NARAL in the 1970s in Oregon. I never thought we'd have to fight this fight again, but here we are, and we have to do this for future generations. Thank you for being with us, everyone.
Thank you so much. Della, let's go to you next.
Aloha, thank you, Yunji. My name is Della Belatti. I'm a current representative of the Makiki-Tantalus area, and I serve as the Hawaii House Majority Leader. I come to this very interested in protecting women's reproductive rights, access to reproductive health care. And I just want to reiterate Yunji's thanks to YWCA for opening up this public dialogue. There's been lots of conversations since the passage of Dobbs, but this really is the first kind of public conversation we're having. And I think it's really critically important that we're all educated about what the impact of Dobbs is. So thank you, Yunji.
Thank you so much. Khara, let's hear from you.
Aloha, friends and sisters, everyone on the call. I'm so glad you could join us. My name is Khara, Jabola-Carolus. I'm the Executive Director of the Hawaii State Commission on the Status of Women. I think all of you hopefully kind of know that one of my biggest kind of tenets is that outside game is as important as our inside game. So I'm involved with the Hawaii Abortion Collective, which is a new formation across all islands that's coming together on the community side to address, the outstanding problems that we face with access and abortion in Hawaii, and not just, respond to the federal level issues, but make sure that we're keeping our eye on what really is changing access here in Hawaii. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. And rounding us out is Dr. Soon.
Aloha kako. My name is Reni Soon. I come to this space as a former college student 30 years ago who had an abortion, and now as an abortion provider. I am a board certified obstetrician gynecologist who provides the full spectrum of reproductive health care, including abortions. And I've been providing abortions and reproductive health care for over 20 years here. I helped establish the Women's Options Center 16 years ago, and I still primarily work there. And I also provide abortions at Planned Parenthood. So thank you again as reiterating what everyone said, I really appreciate having this conversation and being a part of it. Mahalo.
Thank you so much. Corey, let's start with you and what the ruling means for Hawaii. On its face, people are trying to figure out state by state the implications of how this federal decision now affects us here on the ground. Bottom line, is abortion still legal here in Hawaii? People are asking that. So let's start with that.
So abortion is safe and legal in Hawaii, but just to set the stage on how we got to where we are, in terms of when Roe v. Wade was decided in 1973, what the reasoning was that the right to choose abortion was part of a general, broad constitutional right to privacy, but privacy was understood to be intertwined with the very concept of personal liberty, but privacy is not mentioned in the Constitution. So the courts have recognized the right to privacy that came from a collection of different parts of the Constitution: the First Amendment, free speech; the Fourth Amendment, freedom from unreasonable search and seizure; the Fifth Amendment, the right to not have to incriminate yourself; the Ninth Amendment that says rights that are not listed expressly in the Constitution are reserved to the people and not to the government; and the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause. And then after Roe v. Wade, there was a case in 1992, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, that said the Constitution forbids states from enacting legislation that imposes an undue burden on a woman's right to have an abortion. And so when Dobbs came along, what Justice Alito said is that the Constitution makes no mention of abortion, and no such right implicitly is protected in any constitutional provision. So if a right is not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, then it has to be deeply rooted in the nation's history or tradition, and implicit in the concept of ordered liberty in order to be constitutionally protected. And so then he goes on to explain why abortion is not deeply rooted in the nation's history or tradition. And that is why rights such as same-sex marriage, contraception, interracial marriage are all at risk, because using the same reasoning, they would not be found to be deeply rooted in legal history or tradition. So in Hawaii, there are two main statutes that protect abortion. The first, 453-16, was passed in a long time ago, like 1970, and it basically says abortion has to be is prohibited unless it's performed by a licensed physician in a licensed hospital or clinic, and abortion is defined as an operation to intentionally terminate the pregnancy of a non-viable fetus, and the state shall not interfere with a woman's right to choose abortion of a non-viable fetus or an abortion necessary to protect the life or health of the female. And non-viable is not defined, but it's understood to mean, and Dr. Soon can probably elaborate on this, but that the fetus cannot survive outside of the womb. And arguably, that section of the statute also protects a woman's right to terminate a viable fetus if her life or health is in danger. And then the other section, the other statute that protects abortion rights is under the nurses section of the statutes. It's 457-8.7, and it basically allows advanced practice registered nurses, who are like nurse practitioners, to provide medication or aspiration abortion care in the first trimester of pregnancy. And then it goes through some conditions, and a lot of the conditions that are similar to the other statute, in a licensed hospital or clinic, and et cetera, et cetera. So the right, and also the Hawaii constitutional right to privacy also protects abortion, not expressly, but it does say that the right of the people to privacy is recognized and shall not be infringed upon without the showing of a compelling state interest. So, taking all that together, plus case law that sort of firms up privacy rights, although the cases were not about abortion, it does give us the right to abortion. However, there are gaps in the law that we can talk about, like, what does viable or non-viable really mean? There are people in anti-choice states that are trying to define a fertilized egg as a person, and you have a lot of danger that stems from that. And then there are all sorts of constitution or statutory protections too that are not in existence now, but could assist in protecting, say, healthcare providers who provide abortions to women from anti-choice states who travel here. So I'll turn it over to others, but that sort of lays the stage.
Well, thank you for that. Della, let's build on that. There are many states across the nation that are changing their laws. Texas comes to mind, of course, but there are plenty of others. On the other side, what is Hawaii, if you can tell us some of the, let's see, legislature's not in session right now, but what are you hoping for the next session? And are there ways to shore up some of these loopholes that Corey's talking about?
So first of all, I just want to emphasize what Corey said, right? Abortion is safe and legal and accessible in the state of Hawaii. What's happened after Dobbs is now there's a lot of question marks because of the effect of the other state laws that may be reaching into our state with criminalizing of procedures. And so one of the things that's happening nationwide is we actually don't know, and that's why the Dobbs decision is so disturbing, is that it's upset a lot of longstanding practice and in fact, rights that women have enjoyed across the nation for over almost 50 years in some cases. And so, one of the things that's happening at all state levels is legislatures are analyzing the impact of Dobbs and where we might need to shore up, as Corey said, clarify laws and protections so that the people in our state are not harmed further by laws from other states. So for example, we might have an out-of-state student from Texas who has to go to a clinic and, it considers abortion, has a conversation with a healthcare provider, may or may not have an abortion, or get some other services. And the question becomes, if someone from her home state understands what she might have been going through, does that person have a right to basically file a criminal lawsuit or some kind of action against this individual? So we have to look at whether or not those laws can reach into the state and whether or not we want to protect our healthcare providers. I will say from the perspective of myself, it is legal and safe in the state of Hawaii. So we have certain privacy interest rights. We have healthcare laws that protect privacy interests. And so we are going to protect those conversations and decisions, very personal decisions made by women with their healthcare providers. What those laws will look like, we don't know the contours of all of those laws yet, but there are laws that we're going to have to consider.
Okay. Khara, tell us your perspective on this. One of the things I know that you can help people navigate is finding out their lawmakers' position and sort of getting informed and making sure that they understand what resources are available and also where their personal legislature, the people who represent them stand. So can you give us some information on that?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing to say is really where we were coming from. And leadership means standing up when everyone else is too afraid. And so what some of us in the Hawaii Women's Coalition decided to do is to ask legislators to publicly sign a pledge at kind of a critical moment in the election timeline. So a moment when some people might have had some trepidation about publicly taking a stance. And the reason why we did this wasn't to make people squirm or to shame anybody. What we wanted to do was see who are the real champions out there so that we know as women's advocates and as gender justice and reproductive health care advocates, who really is going to stand with us firmly over and over throughout this process. And so what we got from that initial pledge, and this was of sitting legislators only at that time, this was 2 months ago, it was 80% of state senators were publicly willing to commit to fighting to protect and strengthen abortion rights in Hawaii, 80% of our state Senate. And in the state House, it was 55% So those are strong numbers in terms of, we went farther than we thought we would. Everybody has different reactions to their numbers, but the next question, right, is, well, where do I find the names? What do we do with this information? The thing is, the dust hasn't settled, right? We haven't gone through the general election yet. And so we haven't posted this list anywhere except for like an initial social media celebration of those champions. But we have a big rollout that I'll talk about in a little bit this Wednesday. That's a new platform where folks will be able to find information like this after the general election is finished.
That's amazing work. And I think a lot of us will be very interested to see the 55 and the 80% that you're talking about. Dr. Soon, let's hear from your perspective about what this effect, the effect of this ruling on healthcare providers, and also what we're talking about. When we talk about abortion, we don't necessarily just mean someone terminating an unplanned or unexpected pregnancy. We're really talking about abortion care on a broad level, and that can affect IVF, it can affect, pregnancies that are very much wanted. Can you talk about sort of what abortion care encompasses and also the effect of this decision on providers?
Sure. Thank you, Yunji, for that question. Yeah, a lot of times I think people tend to think of abortion as ending a pregnancy that was unplanned and that person, now doesn't want to be pregnant. And that certainly is a fair number of pregnancies or abortions that we see. And patients, people really come to these decisions for all kinds of reasons, right? I mean, there may be a lot, just extenuating circumstances going on in their life. Now is just not the time. They have other goals in mind that having, parenting will make extremely challenging to achieve. So either way, I mean, these decisions are very, very personal. And, but there are a fair number also of people who are seeking abortions who have very wanted pregnancies, pregnancies that maybe they went through IVF in order to become pregnant, pregnancies that they planned a long time for, and something may have happened. They may have developed their own medical condition that's making the pregnancy more high risk for them. There may have been diagnosed with fetal anomalies. So a variety of different things. And again, some people they like to put patients sometimes in a box and think of this as a black and white kind of a decision that's being made. And it's really not. Individuals are individuals and they're incredibly diverse. And we can't know unless we are walking in that person's shoes what they're going through. So these decisions are incredibly, incredibly personal. I think the other thing that people don't realize is the procedures and the medications that are used to end a pregnancy are also the same procedures and medications that are used to treat a miscarriage or to treat a miscarriage that's in the process or about to happen. And so people don't, I think, always think about the fact that, if you don't have people, providers who know who are trained to take care of a miscarriage, who are trained to evacuate or empty a uterus when it's 5 months pregnant, because maybe the pregnant person is in liver failure because of their severe preeclampsia, and continuing the pregnancy will, eventually in a week's time result in death of this person. If you don't have a provider in that area that is skilled, that has the skills to empty that uterus, it doesn't matter if you say, oh, in a medical emergency, we can do this, it can be done. You're not going to have anyone around to do the procedure. So, I mean, this is really why what we are very concerned about, not here in Hawaii, because again, abortion is legal, it is safe here in Hawaii, but in the other states that are experiencing these restrictions, we are expecting some really serious negative outcomes in maternal health. And I really, I think that, yes, Hawaii, we are safe and legal for now, but we have to stay vigilant because, if there was to be something like a federal ban on abortion care, that could eventually affect us here. Providers, I think we are just trying to, again, remain vigilant. We're concerned, like I'm concerned about, I have seen, I just saw someone today who was saying, is it illegal here in Hawaii? These discussions in the media and the social media about the legality of abortion in other states, people are thinking that it's illegal here. And if you think about it, they're still seeking that care, right? It points to the fact that people still seek that care because they need it, even if they think in their minds it's illegal. So it's creating a lot of confusion. It's creating a lot of stigma that is actually hurting patients. And I think that's really what we're concerned about right now.
Khara, I want to circle back to you and the issue of access to care. We've heard it referenced a couple times already, but can you tell us about what you found in terms of access? Because we know that we are an island state and not all women have the same access to care in Hawaii.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely, an Oahu-centric kind of sensitivity to this issue because we often, want to proudly announce that abortion is all set here in Hawaii, but it's really not from the perspective of people in rural and sister island settings. And so one of the things that the Hawaii Abortion Collective spent the last, month and a half doing is connecting with every single island and getting a lay of the land, the most up-to-date lay of the land on what is currently available and what the routes are for people on specific islands. So, I'm just going to keep plugging Wednesday and I'm not going to only give you like sneak peeks, but Wednesday, there's going to be a rollout of a historic new resource that will be island specific.
Okay, and we're looking forward to that. Representative Belatti, is there more that can be done on a state level to help heighten the access? I'm thinking of, the Big Island where I grew up, and, that my understanding is that there are a very limited number of providers there. Of course, there is access through telehealth, thankfully, and we're going to ask Dr. Soon about that in a moment, to medicated abortions. But if you do need to go in person to see a provider, the idea, and my understanding is that Kauai has no access in person. So tell us a little bit about what steps could be taken perhaps from the state level to, more equalize this access.
Oh, I want to circle back to what Corey said in the two statutes she mentioned. There's actually a large gap in time or large time period between when we first enacted HRS 463, I believe, which is the basic abortion law. That was in 1970. It was in 2021 where the state legislature, so a very recent state legislature, enacted the abortion by medication or aspiration by APRNs. So Hawaii is actually very forward looking. We have expanded access by authorizing and empowering APRNs to be able to perform medication or aspiration abortion, which is not something that's recognized in other states. But so on a legislative level, I don't know that there's much more we can do, but what we now need to do is ensure that there are resources to pay for these services, that insurance plans are recognizing these services, and then helping to shore up just general workforce shortages so that we do have APRNs on the neighbor islands who can provide this service as well as a range of services. So I think legislatively, we are good with our laws, but now, and I'm going to tease what Khara is saying, is that we now have to implement the laws that we have. We need to make sure that we have APRNs who are going to go through the training, because there is a little bit of additional training that they have to have in order to be able to engage in medication and aspiration abortion. And so those are the kinds of things we need to do. We need to work with our DCCA and our licensing authorities. We have to work with the University of Hawaii to make sure that APRNs are going through and getting the training they need. And then we need to make sure that the systems out there are hiring the workforce that we need so that they can have the care in those communities. Again, that's a lot to do. It's not just legislation. It is a whole community-wide effort that we need to engage in to ensure that there is reproductive access to care.
Okay, and I want to get to some of the questions in the chat. Dr. Soon, this one is from one of the people watching tonight. It says there are no known in-clinic abortion options on Kauai. Can Dr. Soon speak on the potential detrimental impacts of the lack of this important service at a local on-island level? And then broadening out, can you tell us about your concerns about access to care on the neighbor islands and here on Oahu as well?
Sure. That's correct. There are no known in-clinic, so procedural abortion options on Kauai. There are providers of medication abortion on Kauai, and medication abortion is generally done up to about 11 weeks of pregnancy. Now, of course, medication is not for everyone, and some people don't want to take the medication, and that's fine. But some people are going to be beyond 11 weeks. So what they're going to need to do is leave the island. And yes, that can be detrimental on a lot of levels. I mean, I don't know, a round trip ticket is, I don't know, anywhere from like 80, sometimes 80, as low as 80 or $150, right? So there's a cost of that. There's a cost of taking off work. There's a cost of childcare if you have other kids that you're caring for. And then a provider. I mean, so our Medicaid insurance will cover abortion care, and will, if someone is on Medicaid insurance, it'll cover their travel, but it won't cover the travel of a support person. So all of these things can definitely be a hardship on that patient who has to leave their own community, leave the comfort of their own community in order to get this care. So yeah, it can definitely be an important thing on any of the islands. I do want to point out, and again, as Khara has mentioned a few times, that guide is coming out, and I was a part of putting together that guide. And so there is a procedural abortion provider on the Big Island in Hilo. So at least that is there. There is, Planned Parenthood has 2 clinics on Maui, and one clinic on Maui, one in Honolulu. Women's Option Center is in Honolulu. And then Kauai, as I was talking about. Lanai, they're hoping to be able to start, there's a provider there that's hoping to be able to start medication abortion. And then Molokai, they don't have anyone right now. But so Women's Option Center, as well as Planned Parenthood, we provide telemedicine abortions. So telemedicine abortion is an option where you basically on a Zoom call, but on a more secure platform, on a Zoom call with a healthcare provider to go over your history and eligibility for the medication, and then we can mail the medications to any of the islands throughout the state. And then at Women's Option Center, we also have the ability to provide medication abortion to Guam, because Guam has been without an abortion provider since 2018. So that is an option as well. Nothing is the same as having, a provider in your own community, to be able to go easily down to that provider, that trusted provider that and be able to get an abortion. So yeah, nothing is the same, but there's a number of reasons why that there may be people or providers who don't provide abortions. Those reasons are pretty varied, but especially in small towns, there is a lot of stigma, and there can be a lot of harassment of providers of abortion when it becomes known, especially in that small community, that they provide abortions. So I would just kind of really ask that anybody who is in a small community, one of the things, I mean, we all got to work together to provide this care, but one of the things that we can do is really try to take that stigma and that negative judgment out of abortions and support your, the healthcare providers that are providing abortions. Be vocal about it, because those who do not support abortion and abortion access, they're very vocal about it. And again, that can be really stigmatizing and really scary for some providers.
I want to bring in this question, and thank you for that, Doctor, to Corey. And I think a lot of us are playing out when the Dobbs decision came down and then hearing about what other states are doing, you play a lot of sort of what if scenarios. Well, what if I'm going to college in another state and I fly home for an abortion, but so there's one of those questions that's kind of related to this, and this idea of Hawaii perhaps being somewhat of a safe haven, right, for women to come here and seek abortion from a state that might be more restrictive. So this question from a viewer tonight says, if I help a friend or relative in a state with harsh anti-abortion laws travel to Hawaii to make her choice, am I at legal risk if I later travel to that state? What are some of the implications? I'm sure a lot of this is still being figured out. Texas law just went into effect last week, so not a lot of test cases there. But what about some of these, crossing state line scenarios?
I think it's a definite risk. You're right, things have not been tested out yet, but there are all kinds of questions that arise. I mean, not only might that person be at risk if they travel back to, say, Texas, they could be prosecuted under the aiding and abetting law, or, Texas could try to go beyond its borders to try to prosecute people who give a Texas citizen an abortion here in Hawaii. We just don't know. And that raises the question of whether there might be some kind of thing we can do legislatively to protect providers and healthcare concerns from things like, getting subpoenas for records of providing abortions to citizens or residents of anti-choice states, or some kind of immunity for prosecution of those providers. So I think that, we have to look at all those factors, and the cross-border issues are definitely there. There's some states, anti-choice states, that are trying to prevent their citizens from going to other states by somehow coming up with some criminalization of that interstate travel. Although even the Dobbs decision recognizes that interstate travel, people have the freedom to travel interstate. So, a lot of things are still in play. Employers are actually providing travel benefits for their employees to go to other states to have an abortion or to temporarily relocate. I was noticing there's actually a composite list of big employers who are not afraid of putting their name out there as a company that's pro-choice and providing those benefits. So it's just, there are a lot of moving parts to everything that's going on.
Della, I think that's a natural segue to you to ask if there would be any, inclination to pass some kind of legislation that would protect providers, or, as the viewer was asking, somebody who helps someone cross state lines for this purpose.
I think we should definitely examine our extradition laws and see what we could do, certainly to protect our healthcare providers, because what they are doing here in this state is legal and has been legal in much of the nation for over 50 years. So yes, we will be, that's certainly on the table.
Okay. There's a question for Dr. Soon here tonight. Dr. Soon, can you please speak to specific ways we can support access to abortion services and care for women who face financial hardships?
In the guide that will be coming out, there's information about how to support local abortion funds. So we have 2 local abortion funds, being able to provide, if you want to donate to any of those are there to not only provide direct service care, but as well as can be used for things like transportation or, childcare or things of that nature that will, kind of support someone who's trying to access abortion care.
Okay, and Khara, I'd love you to take this one. Are you able to discuss crisis pregnancy centers across the islands and share what's being done about them? Your perspective on crisis pregnancy centers tonight.
My understanding, and please Representative Belatti, correct me if I'm misremembering, but was that there was legislation passed to address crisis pregnancy centers because they are predatory. Let us not mince words. They are predatory and preying on people when they are at their most vulnerable. And so what I understand though is that that legislation was repealed because it was found to be unconstitutional and went all the way right up to our Hawaii Supreme Court. And that litigation was funded by a national right-wing organization against women's rights and abortion rights. Is that right?
So a little bit of a clarification. We did attempt to regulate crisis centers. What was struck down was, I believe, the regulations around what they could do, but they actually are still subject, I believe, to HIPAA. That part of the law was not struck down. And so they really are in many ways like they have medical folks and staff who provide counseling and services. I think what's really important, as Khara has pointed out, is that you really want to be able to have a conversation and have the full set of procedures and processes and best practices for your consideration. So there will be people, I think we have to accept that these crisis pregnancy centers are here in the community, but I would hope that people who are facing this really tough decision are reaching out, and we'll use this guide that Khara is talking about, because I think, women need to be fully informed of their decisions, and there's going to be a range. There's going to be a range of things that they can do. And so I urge them to speak with healthcare providers like Dr. Soon, their own personal healthcare providers, their own OBGYNs, because I think it's in that relationship with your doctor where you can have the best information provided to you as a woman facing these kinds of decisions.
Corey, Dr. Soon was talking about doing these telehealth appointments and being able to mail the medication to the patient. There's a question here: will mail-in medications be affected, or are they affected by federal laws? How do we make sure that that is protected? And what's your understanding of whether or not, we'll still be able to do that?
Actually, I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe Dr. Soon does. Whether, I don't know whether you can do that mailing. I know that there are restrictions about international mailing of drugs and things like that, but I don't know about within the US whether there are problems with that.
And Dr. Soon, would love for you to take that.
So I can mail a medication to someone where I have a license. So, I have a license in the state of Hawaii. I can mail this medication throughout Hawaii. There are no federal laws right now. I mean, it is approved by the FDA. So I guess that is in a way, a federal thing. So the medication for medication abortion is FDA approved. And so I can mail that to, the state of Hawaii. And also we have in our practice at Women's Option Center, 2 of our providers have licenses in Guam, which is why we can mail those medications to Guam. But I wouldn't be able to mail it to, an address to someone in Texas or someone in another state where I don't have a license.
And sticking with you. Oh, sorry, go ahead, doctor. Well, sticking with you, there was a question about, and please keep the questions coming. Is the Burns School of Medicine on the record and committed to teaching medical students how to properly care for someone who needs abortion care? So Dr. Soon, what's your understanding about the training that that the doctors here in Hawaii are receiving?
Well, so I am on faculty at the University of Hawaii Medical School, and we do, as part of, again, abortion is healthcare. It's a normal part of the reproductive lifespan. I will see a patient sometimes for prenatal care, deliver her baby, and then the very next year she's seeking care from me to have an abortion, and then after that, we're doing a surgery a couple years later. I mean, so it's a part of the spectrum of reproductive health care. It is normal health care. So we do teach medical students about all aspects of reproductive health care, including abortion care. So they are taught about that. And how, depending though on what specialty they choose to go into, that'll get, a little bit gain a little bit more knowledge about it. If someone goes into family medicine, for example, there are rotations within family medicine that cover reproduction, abortion care, and contraception care. OBGYNs will definitely get training in abortion care at the University of Hawaii. That brings up a good point, by the way, in that in states where abortion is now highly restricted or even illegal, those medical students and those OBGYN residents will not be able to get that same kind of training in abortion care. So if you think about it, in 5-10 years, we're going to have this upcoming generation of OBGYNs and family medicine providers, potentially half of them, without having this training.
Wow. Khara, to that point, have there been discussions with, the people in the communities that you work with about how we can help women in other states? I know that this conversation, of course, is very Hawaii centric, but we do live, in a global world. And what are your thoughts about how we can help women who might live in some of these more restrictive states?
I don't want to sound callous, but really we do need to push back and focus on women and gender nonconforming people here first. But at the same time, recognizing that there will be a chilling effect, right? If doctors think, maybe it's safer not to practice, provide abortion care at all in case they get an out-of-state patient and get dinged legally. So it's actually something that protecting providers does have consequences for patients here in Hawaii. So I don't want to just make it seem like, oh, that's just for abortion refugees or, other people, right? So we do need to establish that. And I think right now, as Representative Belatti mentioned, we're looking into legislation for 2023 around that, as well as getting our Attorney General more engaged in clarifying what the legal issues are and protections will be. So I'll just let Rep. Belatti finish that thought.
I'm actually going to telescope a little bit out, because I think this conversation is leading me. Yes, the state legislature can do a lot, and we have to do a lot, but the federal government also needs to do more. And one of the things that we're watching closely is what President Biden has done through executive orders to protect kind of this issue of people traveling, of doctors being able to practice across state lines. And one of the things that we're seeing is that some of these executive orders are carrying, some are falling. So there's going to be litigation in different states. So there's going to be that effort. But even above that, we have to focus on national elections, and national elections matter. We are lucky. I believe we have strong advocates coming from our state. We have to make sure those people go back there, because at the end of the day, one of the things that will solve all of these kinds of questions will be the passage of a federal Women's Health Protection Act. That's the bottom line. The Congress can pass a law that says abortion up to a certain period of weeks. I mean, that's what's going to have to be negotiated and legislated, but they can extend the same rights that we had under Roe v. Wade through a federal law. The opposite is true as well. We could have a Congress that places abortion bans on all states. Now that would be horrific. And I think one of the highlights we have, one of the things that we can look at is the voters of Kansas said no to that. A very conservative state said no to that. And I think that's one of the things that we can focus on, right? Is that this is a right. We have a whole generation of women who have always had this right and never, I don't know a world without Roe v. Wade, except now. And so we have to stand up, and all of us join hands across states and make sure our federal legislators know. And I don't want to take the hook off the state, because Khara, you're absolutely right. We need to do more things to ensure true access here in this state to reproductive health care. And we can do those things. We have to work on both of those fronts. So I think we've got a busy time ahead of us, both to November and past November.
Okay. Corey, I want to bring in this question. This says, to Corianne Lau, would you expand on the implication of the Roe v. Wade reversal on same-sex union as well as other privacy-related societal achievements, sort of the ripple effect of this beyond what we're talking about right in the moment? Oh, and you're muted, sorry.
I mentioned same-sex marriage and contraception and interracial marriage, because those are creations of case law, and they basically were based on that right to privacy that was under the same reasoning as Roe v. Wade. But now that Dobbs came out, and the reasoning is that, well, unless it's mentioned expressly in the Constitution, you have to find that it was deeply rooted in legal history. You're not going to find that there is interracial marriage or same-sex marriage deeply rooted in legal or cultural history. So basically, you're not going to find that those rights are constitutionally protected. And that's why people say, well, that it is an erosion. It can be an erosion. So it's a slippery slope.
There's a great question here. Khara, I want you to lead us off with this one, and we'll go around to everyone. The average community member might feel very helpless looking at the state of things. What can the average person do on an interpersonal, local, state, and federal level to protect the right to abortion care? Khara, let's start with you.
Sure. I mean, almost everyone has mentioned something that comes back to community, whether it's the fear and the doctor shortage because doctors don't want to be ostracized, to legislators feeling like they don't have a political home if they step out for us, which is real. And quite frankly, the average community member has the most powerful and valuable tool to protect abortion, destigmatize abortion, and create access. God, it may be a vending machine, like that level of normalcy we can achieve, because every single average community member is actually connected to the culture and knows how to talk to their community. And that's something that you don't need a law degree or a medical degree to do. And in fact, oftentimes a lot of us who do get these degrees end up not being as connected as people who are still every day organizing or serving the community at the front line in a different capacity. And so that is really what's going to make the difference, because for a long time, we've seen national organizations that are not led by people who look like us or live in Hawaii and are actually demonizing and framing religious communities, meaning Filipino communities, Hawaiian communities, Micronesian, Pacific Islander, Mexican, working class communities as the number one enemy for abortion, because there's been capture of those communities by other organizers. So it really comes down to a matter of organizing. If we don't organize in our communities, somebody else will, and they have. And so it's our time to take back our communities and de-radicalize them from a fascist agenda. And that is what we're set out to do at the Hawaii Abortion Collective.
Dr. Soon, what is your perspective on this for the average person who might feel helpless in this moment about how to best protect these rights?
All what Khara just said. No, seriously. I mean, I've mentioned this before. Stigma is really part of just it hurts. I see it every day in the patients that I see every day. The stigma around abortion, they're making that decision, whatever is driving them to make that decision, having that kind of stigma, whether it's something that they're seeing in social media, whether it's something that they're getting from their community, their family, their friends, it's the stigma. And we've got to take that out on all kinds of different levels. That is something I think that, the average person can do within their community is talk about abortions. It is healthcare. I'm going to say this time and time again. Abortion is healthcare. The people seeking abortions are your neighbors. They're your cousins. They're your teachers. They're your students. They're your friends. Support them. If they come to you, let them know you are there for them without any judgment at all. I think that is what is going to hopefully lead to some of these community norms that are affecting accessibility, that are affecting, patients being able to seek care, the number of providers within our communities. So I think that's really key. And then, I think as Representative Belatti has kind of pointed out, our lawmakers, you can vote. Amongst other things, there's a lot of other things, but voting for people who will protect that right is important. It's not the only thing. There's got to be other things, but those are other things that the average person can do, and then donate to the abortion funds.
And Della, I would go to you on that, you know, beyond voting in the lawmaker, then when there is the page 2 and the session is in full swing, what is the best way to support the some of the legislative items that you had outlined that could be considered in the next session?
Engage in the legislative process. Don't be afraid of the maze. There are going to be advocacy groups that can help you navigate the process. There will be conversations happening at all levels, but so get engaged in the legislative process. It's something that's not scary, and legislators need to hear from people. But I want to go back to that basic thing about even this, for the average person, this conversation that we're having right now is so important. It's going to be through these conversations, and what Reni said, when you talk to people, don't judge. You know, I understand that there's going to be colleagues and advocates who disagree with me, but we need to not judge and think about what is going to be the best policy to ensure access to care so that an individual person can make the choice for themselves. And it's a tough choice. It's a tough choice that they have to make, but it is their choice to make. So I think it's having that conversation, not applying judgment, and then helping people navigate the system is really what the average person can do. And then, right, what Reni said, vote. Use your voice to express your thoughts to your legislators, what's important to you. And I welcome anyone's conversations on this, because we need to understand where other people are coming from to understand, what the contours of the law should be.
And Corey, going to you on this, how you would advise, people who may feel sort of, had the wind knocked out of them by this decision, how to feel empowered and how to protect these rights.
So I think, the price of freedom really is eternal vigilance, and we have to be vigilant about the rights that we have. Della had mentioned that the federal government does have to step it up, and they have in certain respects. For example, they put out FAQs on contraception and the fact that under the Affordable Care Act, you have the right to contraception, which without any copay. And so if your insurer is saying, no, you've got to pay a copay, you've got to step it up and call them on it and challenge them. And contraception includes emergency contraception, which is Plan B. It's different from medication abortion, but it is included under the Affordable Care Act. So, just watch out for your own rights. This morning, there was an interesting program on NPR where they talked about limitations for under Catholic healthcare providers, where they will not fund things like permanent contraception, like tubal ligations and vasectomies. But providers have been able to get around that by, if there's a problem with, a risk of ovarian cancer, they can prescribe it, or for things like IUD, if there's excessive bleeding or something like that, they can get around that and women can still get that sort of care. Women and individuals can still get that care at those Catholic hospitals if the providers will advocate for them. But people need to know what their rights are and help each other, help other people who do not know what their rights are, and make sure that we preserve that these freedoms that we have here in Hawaii.
Dr. Soon, I'm interested to get your thoughts on where you see the biggest gaps in access right now in the state of Hawaii. We talked about neighbor island communities and just the distances that some folks may have to travel. I know you mentioned that there's a provider in Hilo, but Hawi is a long way from Hilo. So if you're, someone who doesn't necessarily have access to a vehicle, there can be a lot of sort of impediments, but, sort of broadly speaking, what do you see as the biggest impediments to accessing this kind of care here in Hawaii? And what would you like to see change?
It's a tough question for me to answer, because as someone who provides abortion care and public about it, I don't know the ins and outs of why providers don't. I mean, we have healthcare providers on all of the islands. I'm not exactly, sure why an individual personal, abortion provider. And again, it's not only doctors, but it's also advanced practice clinicians or advanced practice registered nurses that can provide abortion care, can provide medication abortion. There may be some aspect of training, like I was saying, depending on what specialty you go into, what you're specializing in. So there may be some aspect of that. But I think a lot of it is the stigma. And again, especially if you're in a small town, I keep coming back to this. I know I sound like a broken record, but especially if you're in a small town, you get known as the abortion provider, and you can have picketers, protesters outside of your office. Your employer, if you're employed by someone, may not like that very much. That may get in the way of, your other patients who are seeking other care. I'm sure a number of people have, regularly drive down Beretania. You can see the protesters outside of Planned Parenthood. That has a strong effect on patients who have to walk through those crowds. And it definitely can have an effect on the providers as well. So, when we think about the gaps, I mean, yes, Javi is a long way from Hilo. Could there be an abortion provider in Javi? I don't know. I don't live in that community. I don't know what that community's perspective is on abortion care. I wouldn't be able to speak to what it would be like to provide abortions in that community. But that's why I'm kind of asking, like, if you are in these communities, talk about abortion openly, normalize abortion, and hopefully maybe then we can change these community norms, and there will be providers who are feeling better about providing medication or aspiration abortion.
Khara, you've done a lot of work in this space. I'm interested to get your thoughts on, how you see the landscape and access to care here in Hawaii when it comes to accessing abortion, and where you see the biggest gaps.
I think, even if you're one of us and at the nucleus of reproductive health care and women's rights and frankly, local power, you can be blindsided by, if you've never had an abortion before, what you need to do to get one and where to go. And if we are that clueless, imagine a child or a teenage girl or gender nonconforming person, or imagine a transgender person who's scared to go to the doctor as is, or imagine an undocumented person. We have high percentages relative to the continent of these groups of very vulnerable people who do not have easy access to abortion, even if they're on Oahu. And so for me, in this conversation, we have to protect doctors and balance that with centering, I guess you would call them like the consumer, right? Or like the patient, and making sure that we're answering to that. And I think for folks who might feel like, okay, well, this feels a little like, I don't know what I can grasp in terms of like getting involved yet, it's still not clear enough. Like maybe that's creating a hub in your, like I'm in EVA, right? Creating a hub in EVA where people can just go for non-judgmental information and just put it out there, like organize moms through something that's not related to abortion, and then get there after a couple book clubs or potlucks or whatever. It's a really easy thing to do. It sounds intimidating, but all you need is one or two friends to do it. And I swear, I organized a tinikling, like the Filipino folk dance. I just was like, put out a free class in the park across the street from us, and 40 children came. And all those moms who were there, I could easily organize, right? And so these are the kinds of ways that you can take, well, just maybe how do I talk about it, into something that's structured and supportive for your actual neighborhood. And that's what I would recommend, because one of the things that we haven't talked about is Dobbs isn't the only source of misinformation. Part of what we've had to do, and I'm not blaming us, but is a strategy of secrecy, because if we put everything out there, right, about abortion, we are worried that we'll play into the opposition. But as a result, right, it's very hard to know all the, like everything you wanted to know about abortion and more. Like, where is that central source of information. It's coming on Wednesday. Sorry, I'm gonna hype it again. But it's
please
coming
do.
on Wednesday.
I think everybody, there's a lot of questions. What is happening on Wednesday? How do I find out more? So please go ahead.
Sorry, everybody. I promise to keep, I made a Scout's honor not to give away all the cards, but there's gonna be a press conference at noon. And almost everybody here presenting is going to be there, including Representative Belatti and Dr. Soon. And so at 12 o'clock on noon, we're gonna launch this, this solution to this lack of central, accurate, non-judgmental, and accessible information that is literally everything you need to know about abortion, the legal status, where to find one on every island, what to expect just from like a lay, normal like narrative as you go through a pill abortion. All these questions that I'm seeing in the chat, well, maybe not all of them. I hope we answer all of them. And so we'll be launching it on social media on Wednesday too. So if we do a good job, hopefully you'll see it everywhere. I hope you do. And if not, on the news as well. And there will be a website you can go to that's launching on Wednesday that houses this resource.
Okay, and Representative Belatti, I'd like to get your thoughts on sort of building on what Khara's talking about, you know, having these conversations. You know, you're not one to shy away from having difficult conversations, but some people feel like, well, I'm not necessarily someone who, you know, feels like I have a dog in this fight. How do I have this conversation? What is your advice to those folks?
I'm going to connect your question to another question that was in the chat about community health workers. Community health workers is actually a real specific term of art, and we're starting to think about in the healthcare space licensing of community health workers, people who are in the community who can talk about these issues. But, you know, setting that aside, I think everyone has the ability to educate themselves through this resource that's going to be coming out. And then, you know, how do you talk about it? You have to educate yourself first, and then not be afraid to use your voice. There are allies in the community. There are allies in this space. There are going to be connections that you can make through the website that Khara is going to be, I believe, you know, announcing. And there's going to be people in your community. So find those like-minded community members. And then, because there are people in need, there are going to be young girls who are facing these issues, not, you know, young people facing these issues and questions. And you're going to come across them. They're going to be in your life. I think the statistic is something like 1 in 4 women, Reni, will have or have had an abortion.
Yes.
So it's here. It's going to happen, and you care about those people in your life. So reach out to them. Be non-judgmental. Give them the information they need. Be supportive. That's how you do it. So you become your own community health worker in your little space, and you strengthen your community that way. You provide support to the people you love.
And Reni, actually, let's build on that for a moment. How do we best support a woman who is going through this process? You know, you talked about, you know, speaking out and being vocal and taking the stigma out of it. But, you know, as Khara was saying, these are often things that are happening in secret. How do we best support women who are going through this, especially with a statistic like that, 1 in 4? It's definitely someone that we know, if not ourselves.
Yes, it is. Abortion is incredibly common. 1 in 4 pregnancy capable people in this country will have unintentional abortion. 1 in 4. So anyone who thinks that they don't know or that they don't love someone who has had an abortion, you're wrong. That person just hasn't told you about it. So be someone who, you know, your friends or your family can turn to when they're, you know, going through a pregnancy that either is having some difficulties or that they're, you know, intending to seek an abortion. Try to be that person. You know, each individual is going to be different. I mean, some people, they come to the office by themselves. They don't want to talk to anybody else. Some people come to the office with their partner and their mom and their brother or something, you know, so people are going to choose who they want with them, and the level of support that is provided to a person who is seeking this care is entirely up to them. But I think you can always just, you know, if they come to you, be there, be open so that they can come to you. I think that's kind of the main thing. And, you know, it's whatever they need. I mean, again, a person's needs are going to be different depending on the situation that they're in. I'm going to stress again the individuality of the circumstances that people are going through. There is no boilerplate, you know, template about what someone is going through. What one person went through is going to be completely different from what another person is going through, even if they both took the medication or even if they both had a procedure. It's going to be entirely different. Their situation is entirely different. What they're going to need from someone supporting them is going to be a little bit different. All I can say is just be there, be supportive, no judgment. You know, abortion is healthcare.
And Corey, you know, I want to build on something that you said, which is to know your rights. We hear that a lot, but how do we actually do that? How do we know what we're entitled to, you know, in terms of our healthcare, in terms of access, in terms of what should be covered for the layperson who hasn't gone to law school? What is your best advice to them?
I think it's really to talk to people and get that support that you need. You know, it is hard when you've got a scared teenager who really can't turn to a parent. But I think that Dr. Soon is right. You know, you just have to be open to sharing, to talking, to get others to open up and talk. And, you know, there are those who are disenfranchised and not empowered to be an advocate for themselves. And so I think that people really need to be supportive of each other and be advocates for others so that they're not so isolated.
Dr. Soon, there's a practical question we wanted to ask you. We know that Plan B is emergency contraceptives, contraception. It's not an abortion, but there is some confusion as to whether Plan B, the morning after pill, if that is still legal. Can you speak to that?
Sure. Yes. Plan B, it goes by that's like one name. I mean, it's also called Next Choice, or it's emergency contraception. There's another pill that's called Ella, ELLA, that is also emergency contraception. Those are good for preventing pregnancy after the fact for up to 5 days after. So yes, it's contraception. It's not causing an abortion. It is contraception. If someone is pregnant already, taking all the Plan B in the world won't make a difference. It's contraception, and it is legal until some crazy national law that Corey was talking about comes along and makes contraception illegal, but it is legal.
Okay, we are almost out of time. It goes very quickly, but we do have a few minutes. And so I'd just like to go around and talk about next steps. We hope that this is the first of many conversations. Of course, we do thank the YWCA of Oahu for starting this conversation. But Corey, let's start with you about what you would want the audience to know in terms of next steps. I know that you know, it was just like what someone had written about feeling kind of disempowered. What you would hope people do now that they have the information that we got here today, what do you hope they do with it?
I think just going along with the theme of normalizing it, normalizing abortion. Abortion is part of reproductive care, which is part of healthcare, and everyone is entitled to healthcare. And so we just have to talk about it more. We have to normalize it. We have to make sure that people can use the word abortion without shrinking away, because we have a lot of rights here in Hawaii, but we need to make sure that others feel normal about talking about how abortion in the state.
Okay, Della, you know, the legislative session is still months away, but I'm sure you're gearing up. And so your final thoughts to the participants tonight.
Be involved, and you can get involved by being present. January 18th, 2023 is the opening day of the 2023 legislative session. Be there. You can be there virtually by watching us. Contact your legislators, share with them your support for women's reproductive rights. And then remember this website, capital.hawaii.gov. That's going to be the way that you can track all of the legislation that's going to be coming through, and we will see legislation on these issues. So if it's important to you, capital.hawaii.gov.
Okay, Dr. Soon, you know, the next steps, what you advise folks to do, how we stay engaged on this issue. I know you're going to say that we need to be able to talk about this. So, you know, give us sort of the final thought from you tonight.
I'm just going to pick up on what Representative Belatti also said about being engaged, is that it's actually really, really easy to submit testimony if you go to that website. So there are going to be bills, like Representative Belatti was saying, there are going to be bills that will be supporting access to abortion care, and there are going to be bills that are going to be attempting to restrict access to abortion care. It's super, super easy to submit testimony. Like you can even just click a yes or a no. So I'm going to throw that out there as one thing. But again, I mean, just keeping in mind that we all know and love people who have had or are seeking abortions. Abortion is healthcare. Keep repeating that in your communities, in your grocery store, in your post office, at the school. Like keep repeating that because yeah, that's, I think, to me, that is at the core of how we are going to start changing the community norms and making abortion more accessible and having more providers being more out there about providing abortions. And then of course, the local abortion funds. There are two, information will be in the guidebook. I could even put a link. Well, anyway, I'll just leave it. It's in the guidebook.
Okay. Well, and that's a natural lead into Khara about Wednesday. And also there was a question in the chat. Folks wanted to know when they might be able to see that lawmaker list that you assembled, if that's part of the guidebook as well.
It's not part of the guidebook, but I went to our website, our trusty old state website, and it's no longer there. So I need to get it put back up. So I promise I will make that a priority over the next week or two. And we can do some sort of announcement so that it's been done. Happy to do that for that point. Yeah.
And then let's let you have the final word tonight on what we can expect, and also how we stay connected, how we engage on this, and how we best support women and those who are seeking this kind of healthcare.
I think what's really instructive is looking at how other places around the world, where everyone said it would be impossible to win the legal right to abortion. We're talking Ireland, Argentina, extremely religious, like we're talking 80-90% Catholic, right? Nations and communities. How did they win? And it was the 3 C's. Instead of talking about individual choice and kind of libertarian my values, which have a backside, they make abortion seem like, well, you made the choice, you made your bed, now lie in it, right? And it can have a very isolating effect. Instead, we lead with the 3 C's, and those are community, compassion, and care. And that is what they led with when talking about abortion, because we're framed so much as just callous, as people who don't value mental or emotional health. And so these other groups just love bomb women to take advantage of them, and we have to take that back. And so for you, just do winnable campaigns. We're going to be obsessed with the legislature. We do need you. I'm not trying to say we don't, absolutely, but don't fetishize legislation either. There's a lot of campaigns that you can be doing. Like a campaign around a hospital, right? That's hostile to the doctors who want to provide there. Why don't you get the names of their board members and their CEO and do a campaign that pressures them to change their policy? There's so much that you can do. You are absolutely the hero of this story, regardless of what happens at the federal level. We have to hold down our turf. So thank you everybody so much. See you Wednesday.
I love that. You are the hero of this story. Thank you all for joining us tonight. It's progressively gotten darker. We're all broadcasting from our little caves here tonight, but we appreciate all of you logging in, and we appreciate you sharing this information. Remember that this discussion will be on the YWCA of Oahu's website shortly, so you'll be able to share it with other people in your community who you think need access to this information. Be sure to look out for that press conference noon on Wednesday and the news stories that follow. Share that information, because that's another way that people can really engage on this. And keep in mind all of the wonderful tips and points we got today. We again mahalo YWCA of Oahu for having this discussion today. Thank all of you for joining us. We hope to see you all again soon, and have a great night. Aloha.
Aloha.